So, you want to debunk evolution, huh? Well, hey, if you want to set the bar high, I encourage it. Go right ahead. But before you proceed, let me present you with one question. Why is it that you need to disprove evolution? Hey, I know it could just be a flying fucking coincidence that every single person on here that tries to disprove evolution happens to be a theist. But let's look into that statistic that I've just developed in my head this last second. Have any of you encountered anybody who tried to disprove evolution or claim that evolution wasn't true who wasn't a theist? Now, you could take that at face value, but let's explore it a little deeper. Now, why is it that a theist would intentionally attack evolution as opposed to, say gravity or electricity? You see, it all started back in the 1650s as a well-known bishop named James Ussher studied the genealogies of the Old Testament. By doing so, he calculated that the earth was created in 4004 BC. I must admit, for the time, that was a suitable answer, as we did not have dating techniques, we did not understand what evolution was. There are many drawbacks as far as our scientific knowledge. We could not have known how old the Earth was at that time. To make a long story short, this remained the most viable answer up until 24th of November 1859, when all hell broke loose. This was the date that Charles Darwin published his book, The Origin of Species. It is also important to note that up until about 100 years before the book was published, Christians were pretty fucking used to getting whatever the hell they wanted. The Papal states essentially held power over the entire world and dictated exactly what and was not acceptable for the public domain right across Europe and further countries. Luckily for Charles Darwin, though, his works were published in a time when the world had reached an age of reason, where he wouldn't have been slapped to a stake, tied up, and burned alive for disagreeing with what the church said. Charles Darwin was confronted almost immediately for his published works, as most people at that time were entirely dependent on the views that they had derived from the biblical and faith-based perspective. In the early 19th century, creation was taught in nearly all schools in the United States, often from the position that the literal interpretation of the Bible is inerrant. As stated before, Christians had been entirely akin to getting their own way, and when evolution began appearing in science classrooms across the United States, these Christians felt so threatened by it that they decided to take it up in a court of law. This brought about a campaign led by a Mr. William Jennings Bryan, who led several states to introduce a legislation prohibiting the teaching of evolution. Around 1925, the American Civil Liberties Union offered to defend anyone who wanted to bring a test case against any one of these laws. A man by the name of John T. Scopes acted in defiance by teaching his class in Tennessee out of a textbook called Hunter's Civic Biology, published in 1914. So it went to trial, and as it were, essentially John Scopes lost the case. However, the real eye-opener in this entire endeavor was the fact that John Scopes merely got a slap on the wrist for what he had done. This trial is essentially what kickstarted the entire choose your side of the line concept. Your average citizen said, teach science, it's science. Whereas the fundamentalist religious movement petitioned that if you believed in evolution, you were in direct defiance of the Bible. This so-called controversy continued to tread water until approximately 1987. Intelligent design originated in response to the 1987 United States Supreme Court Edwards versus A. Gillard ruling involving the separation of church and state. Once these rats realized that they weren't going to worm their way into the educational system using the title of creation, they decided to change their game plan. They worked long and hard developing methods to infiltrate the educational system and remove evolution, or at least teach the controversy, so to speak. Enter 2005, Dover versus State. The holding read by Judge Jones for the case in question reads as follows. Teaching intelligent design in public school biology classes violates the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment of the Constitution of the United States and Article 1, Section 3 of the Pennsylvania State Constitution. Because intelligent design is not science, and cannot uncouple itself from its creationist and thus religious antecedents. Now, throughout all this, you might be wondering, why is this all relevant? Well, you see, with all great actual debunctions requires knowledge about the subject you're trying to debunk. It is entirely important to understand why creationists feel the need to attack evolution specifically. Their primary directive is derived from their understanding that evolution poses a threat, a valid threat, an underlying threat to their faith. I'm here to exemplify that it causes no such threat. Nowhere in Genesis does it state the age of the earth. And for you diehards out there, even in the King James Version, please tell me where it states the age of the earth. Here's the obvious conclusion. All of this originated from one man, James Ussher, over 300 years ago, who just simply could not have known the actual age of the earth, and he did his best job at figuring it out. After reading about James Ussher, I can almost guarantee you that he himself would be entirely disappointed if he was to witness the direction that these religious fundamentalists have taken his writings. The entire reason he conducted his research in the first place was to further the knowledge of man. In case you hadn't picked up on the hint, hint, nudge, nudge, that's exactly what science is and does for us currently today. So now I'm going to conclude with that million-dollar question. Why is it, really, that you try to discredit evolution? Are you sure it's got nothing to do with what you've been told about it? Do you honestly think it's because evolution doesn't have a foot to stand on? Maybe it's time you stop listening to your peers and start thinking for yourself. Quite frankly, I respect my father above most theists that I've ever met in my entire life. The reason for that is because he believes in God because he wants to, not because of what he's been told. Hell, I respect Veritas 48 on a whole new level because he uses his brain as opposed to just regurgitating the same crap that you read on creationist websites. If you ever hope to be taken seriously, it's time you move on from this whole debunking evolution bullshit concept. It's time you wake up and realize that evolution is not your enemy. It's time you woke up and realized that even atheists are not your enemy. Your enemy is your own personal insecurities in your belief. If you want to believe in God, that is perfectly fine, and I will support you to the very end. But if you even so much as attempt to hold evolution accountable, then I'm going to call you on your regurgitative bullshit immediately. It exemplifies to me that you're not a theist, but in fact a lemming. And I'm not about to discuss the matters at hand with somebody who's incapable of using their own fucking brain.